hello there, everybody. That music means that it is high noon in Chicago, and it's time for yet another fall publishing webinar. I'm Chris Beatties, editor of Growertalks and Green Profit magazines and the e-newsletter Acres Online, and I'm going to be your host for the next 50 minutes or so as we tackle today's topic. You should see it right on your screen, a Kabloom and Crave Calibrachoa culture clinic. Now, you should by now be well aware of Kabloom and Crave. Bred by Pan American Seed, they are the first Calibrachoa from seed. Kabloom is the standard colors, and Crave, a ball seed exclusive, is novelty colors. And in today's webinar, you're going to be learning a lot about them. In fact, every single detail you need to grow Kabloom and Crave plugs and finished plants. Now, as usual, sorry to say, I'm not the expert on the topic, but who is? Well, we've got two of them today, and one of them is sitting right next to me at the Ball Publishing Broadcast Center, and that is Lisa Lacey.
Hi, Chris.
Welcome, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well. Glad to be here.
And welcome to the palatial Ball Publishing Broadcast Center. We're here in West Chicago, Illinois, broadcasting. Now, Lisa, you're going to be covering kind of all the general cultural details for both plugs and finished today, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
All right. Now, for the really scientific stuff, not that you couldn't do it, but, you know, for the scientific stuff, you need a scientist, Absolutely. A PhD, a doctor, yeah. and we've got one of those, and that would be Dr. Sonali Padia. Sonali, you're there, right?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everybody.
Well, beautiful. Sonali, where are you broadcasting from today?
I am broadcasting from my home in beautiful mountains of Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina. Any snow on the tops of the mountains yet?
Not yet, but maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we're about to have some here in Chicago. It was, what, 29 this morning?
Yeah, balmy 29.
Anybody listening in from someplace warm, don't send us any little taunting notes in the chat area, please, about how it's 73 and beautiful, balmy as you listen on the beach. Anyway, well, Sonali is going to be covering a lot of the research details, the data, the technical aspects of our Calibrachoa today. And as usual, there I am, Chris Beatties, and I'm going to be working the controls here. Now, as always, we need to thank a sponsor.
Yes.
We can't do this without them, and in this particular case, Ball Seed Company is our sponsor, so thank you very much, Ball, for helping us out today. Now, if you've got questions, and I pretty much guarantee you will, because I had a bunch of them as we went through this yesterday in rehearsal, you can go to the little chat area that you see on the side of your screen. You should have a little the toolbar on the side. There's a chat area, and just type it into to us hosts or panelists, and we'll either tackle them as we go along, depending upon the topic, or we'll tackle them at the end. We'll leave a little time at the end. And if something happens, a customer comes in or your lunch arrives and you can't stick with us, fear not, because we will be archiving this webinar at ballpublishing.com/webinars. It's the same place you went to sign up, most likely, and it'll be up within, hopefully, a few hours of getting things going. So I think that's pretty much all of our housekeeping. Lisa, you ready to take it away?
I am ready to roll.
All right, let's go.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And we're going to be covering a lot of ground today. We'll talk in depth about the plug culture related to the Calibrachoas, and we'll also discuss the finished culture as we go through the webinar. So first up, Chris referenced at the onset, we have core colors in the Kabloom series. Here are the 5 colors: the deep blue, deep pink, red, yellow, and white. There's also Crave Sunset, which is the start of a collection where we're planning to house varieties that tend to be a little bit larger in plant structure and of more unique colors. So we'll be covering the culture related to all these varieties as we go through the next set of slides. First of all, we're going to start with the plug culture, and kind of to set the stage about the stages, I just want to reiterate how we stage these. So a stage 1 is essentially germination ending at radical emergence. So you can think about it from the moment that plug tray hits the watering tunnel at the end of the sowing line, that's the start of stage 1, and it ends at radical emergence. You get into stage 2, that's where you get the cotyledon development. So you see the full cotyledons developed. Picture 2. on the slide. Stage 3 ends where you get the true leaves. A pair of true leaves are established and developed. And finally, stage 4 is the pullable plug stage. Obviously, this can take, the longest component of the production time. So now that we've set the stage about the stages, let's talk a little bit more in depth about plug stage 1. This product is sold as a single seeded pellet. The pellet is essentially the same size as pelleted petunias, so you can utilize your sowing, your drum sizes that you've become accustomed using for pelleted petunias for the calibs. We recommend 1 seed per cell, and we'll get into the various plug sizes that we've tested. And like all pelleted products, you really want to make sure that you get that pellet broken down with adequate moisture. Covering is not required for the plug tray, so you can leave the seed exposed. There's no benefit to covering. And likewise, you can germinate the Calibrachoas in either light or dark conditions. So there's some flexibility there for you when the season really gets busy and your chambers become pretty full. The real key element in stage 1 is moisture management. And as it shows here on the slide, stage 5, which is the most saturated level of moisture, is recommended for the Calibrachoas. We worked with 4 large growers in North America to evaluate plug stage 1 level 4 moisture versus level 5 moisture. And you'll see in a few slides, we're going to talk about the different rate of germination speeds across the varieties. Those that are faster germinating were fine with a stage 4 moisture level. Those that are a little bit more sensitive, such as deep blue, really benefit from a moisture level of 5. So we recommend moisture level 5. It's not detrimental to the faster germinators. There's no hypocotyl stretch. So we really want to see good saturation in your plug stage 1. That's going to give you the best start for germination.
As far as the temperatures for stage 1 go, Kabloom and Crave can be successfully germinated at a very broad range of temperatures, ranging from 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees centigrade all the way up to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And within this particular effective temperature range, warmer the temperature, it just acts as a speedometer. So the warmer the temperature, the faster the speed of germination. Overall, for the entire 2 series, for all the varieties, the optimum media temperature that results in maximum germination is about 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 22.5 degrees centigrade. And if you use this particular temperature in stage 1, the radical emergence occurs in about 5 to 7 days. This next graph shows the effect of stage 1 temperature on Kabloom-wide germination. On x-axis, we have days from sowing, ranging from 0 all the way to 14, that's 2-week period, and the y-axis shows germination percentage. The 4 different colored lines represent 4 different temperatures that we tested in stage 1. The blue line shows 15 degrees centigrade. If you take a look at the graph, the germination is really slow at 15 degrees centigrade or 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Therefore, we don't recommend this temperature in stage 1. The other 3 temperatures, 68 Fahrenheit shown in red, 73 degrees Fahrenheit shown in green, and 77 degrees Fahrenheit shown in purple, are fairly similarly effective in case of Kabloom white. The arrow that's drawn on day 6 from sowing shows maximum germination on day 6 at all these 3 different temperatures for Kabloom white. Therefore, the optimum temperature range is really broad for this variety. Now, Lisa did mention that Kabloom deep blue is a little more sensitive. And the second graph is set up for deep blue exactly the same as white. And here, if you take a look at the dotted line on day 6, now we only have about 50% germination at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And at the other 2 effective temperatures, 73 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit, the germination rate is only about 70%. So on day 6, deep blue doesn't completely germinate or achieve maximum germination. To get that, you need extra 4 days. On day 10, as shown in the graph by a solid black line arrow, we reached maximum germination at 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So once again, deep blue is a little bit slower to germinate compared with white. We did extensive grower trialing for many different varieties in Kabloom series as well as in Crave collection. And this is a little bit busy graph, but I'll break it down and simplify it as I go along. This graph shows final germination percentage reported by growers coded as G1 through G23. These are 23 unique different sites. These data were provided by some of you in the audience, and thank you very much for that. On the right-hand side, you have I1 through I6. These are our internal research trial locations within Pan Am. 80% shows a dotted line because the germination standard for this product is 80%. So essentially our goal in looking at these data were to determine for different colors or varieties in the assortment within the grower trials as well as our internal trials, were there any problems in meeting the germ standards? So let's break it down to a couple of different varieties that really hone in on what happened. The first graph shows deep pink, set up similarly to the previous slide that I explained. And if you look at this graph, perhaps at G8 there is a little bit lower germination, but overall we confidently can say that in every trial site where this product was trialed, pretty much everybody achieved the 80% germination standard. In majority of the sites, growers got more than 90% germ, and we in our internal trials also got 90 to 100% germ based on the trial time and location. Now this picture changes a little bit as we look at deep blue. Deep blue is a more sensitive variety, and out of 23 grower trial sites, only 11 sites achieved more than 80% germ. So they met our germ standard only at about half the sites. And in 4 out of our 6 internal trial sites, we were able to meet the germ standard. So we started thinking about this scenario, and we asked the question why this might be the case. The next graph, which is showing days from sowing on x-axis and germination percentage on y-axis at 77 degrees Fahrenheit, sheds a little bit of light on what might be going on here. Deep pink on day 6 from sowing is at almost 100% germination, but deep blue at that time was at about 70% germination. And the varieties that were typically trialed in the marketplace included deep blue, deep pink, white, and yellow. And other than deep blue, all the other varieties germinated fairly quickly. And therefore, majority of the growers would have probably moved the trays from stage 1 area into stage 2 on about day 5 or 6. However, deep blue actually requires 4 additional days to achieve maximum germination, and therefore we concluded that perhaps germination speed was responsible for lower germination seen in many of the grower trials. Therefore, we decided to group the varieties in the assortment into 2 different classes based on their germ speed. One class is fast germinating varieties, and that's Kabloom white, Kabloom deep pink, Kabloom yellow. And these varieties germinate at 77 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in about 5 days from sowing. If you germ them cooler at about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, they might take 5 to 7 days to achieve maximum germination. Now, in contrast, there are slow germinating varieties in Kabloom series and also Crave Sunset. These varieties are deep blue and Kabloom red. At 77 degrees Fahrenheit, they take about a week or 10 days to achieve maximum germination. And at a cooler temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit, they took more than 10 days to germinate. So in order to achieve maximum germination success, you need to be aware that you need to give different stage 1 time based on the germinating speed of these varieties.
When we look at the temperature adjustments going from stage 2 to stage 4, like many other crops, we recommend a drawing down of that temperature. So as you move from stage 1 to 2, we recommend dropping to 68. It's stage 3, 64, and then stage 4 in the 55 to 64 range. We don't recommend anything less than 55. It really does slow down the plug development. The photo here demonstrates really the benefit of the cool grown, denser, a little bit bulkier plug compared to a more warm grown, something in the mid 70s. We can see elongation of the internodes. So it just gives a better toned plug overall. Another adjustment as you go into stages 2 through 4 is to start to reduce the moisture levels. As we suggested, plug stage 1 is a high level of moisture. As you get into stages 2, 3, 4, we recommend that cycling between moisture level 2 and moisture level 4. In these stages, the key thing here is don't allow those plugs to wilt. Much like vegetative Calibrachoa, these don't like to be wilted to a heavy degree. A key point in this slide we really want to point out is the daily light interval, the DLI. The Calibrachoas, like petunias, they thrive under the high light intensity. So in the young plant stage, it's really important to have at least 10 moles or greater of light because if it's too low at 2, 3, 4, we have observed quite spindly, elongated plugs. So there is a big benefit here to having 10 moles or greater. And we'll show some photos here soon about the differences that the light provides. Other aspects of the plug production, pH and EC, quite similar to petunias, and likewise when you're watching for the pests or disease, it's very similar to vegetative Calibrachoas. PGRs, this is one of the more common questions I think that Sonali and our product reps and I get. What are the best PGRs to be used on the plugs of the Kablooms and Craves? So we've done a lot of testing. Many of you in the audience were helpful in providing feedback on what you did. And so we've kind of consolidated all that and come with these recommendations. So essentially, regardless of what PGR you're applying, our recommendation is to apply that first spray approximately day 7 or day 10. This is after the completion of stage 1. So as Sonali shared with you, some of the genetics are going to get through that stage 1 a little bit quicker, some are going to be a little bit slower. So just make sure those are through stage 1, and then you can begin the spray regime. We recommend, I'm going to say 2.5, and I'll explain that half here with the diminizide in a moment. But effective PGRs on the Calibrachoa plugs include top floor, fluoropyrimidol, bonsai or paclobutazole, and diminizide, B9 and ALAR. And you see there's a little asterisk beside the diminizide, and I will talk a bit more about that in a couple of slides. So this slide here is a really good representation of what we observed across the trials and across the varieties as we tested them in our internal locations and in the market. This represents PGRs were applied on about day 7, and then 3 more as needed on, this is Kabloom white plugs, but this would be applied to any of the Kablooms and the Crave genetics. In this photo, you'll see there's bonsai applications at 3 parts per million, B9 at 2,500, a B9 at 1,250, a bonsai at 1, and then there's a control on the far right. And we really like the look of the B9, the diminizide at 2,500 parts per million. It certainly gives height control, but it also gives that good beefiness that we like. The paclobutazole, the bonsai, also provided good control, good height control, not quite as beefy, but it still is a reasonable plug control compared to the diminizide and certainly compared to untreated control. So those PGRs, along with the top floor, I don't happen to have photos of the top floor, but it also provided a similar performance, say, between the B9 and the bonsai performance. So it's an acceptable product as well for plug PGR recommendations for control. As promised, I want to talk a little bit more about B9 and why we have an asterisk. As seen in the pictures and from multiple trials, it is very effective. However, diminizide, B9, ALR can cause chlorotic stippling on Kabloom red, as depicted in the photo of the plug in the bottom right. Basically, it's sort of yellowish white spots on the leaves. It is similar looking to, say, spider mite damage. So it affects Kabloom red to the greatest degree, and we see a little bit of impact on Kabloom yellow and Crave sunset. Now, the percentages and the impact on the plant material vary from trial to trial. If high rates and frequent applications of B9 were applied, it could stunt the plug. If it was one light application, sometimes those plugs grew out of it after a few weeks. that's why we have the note of caution in the PowerPoint and also in all of our culture recommendations. We saw no stippling whatsoever with paclobutazol or fluoropyrimidol. So,
Lisa, if you want to use B9, how can you best avoid the risk of the stippling issue?
Well, if you want to use B9, maybe lighter rates, as limited as possible. I would suggest, if you can, I would go to paclobutazol or fluoropyrimidol to really give you the safest performance.
All right, fair enough.
Branching. Well, it's certainly the goal of the program is to provide genetics that have good branching from a non-pinched plug. And so on the left is an example of a plug grown at our Elburn facility. It was non-pinched. This is a 6-week-old 288 plug. Genetically, these will branch and fill out the container sizes that I'll speak of later. The picture on the right is from a California trial. That's a 1 plant and a 4.5-inch, 6 weeks from transplant. So without a pinch, it really fills in beautifully. From a reference point, for those of you who visited the Pan American spring trials, all the Calibrachoa in the Pan Am area there was grown without pinch. So you recall back to April, full plants without pinching. Then at our Cultivate booth, a portion of the material was grown with pinch and a portion of the material was grown without. I think most people would be hard-pressed to discern the difference. So essentially it can be done. However, there may be situations where a pinch is really beneficial. And internally we talked a lot about this. So we have some recommendations here and some photos to demonstrate the benefit and the value of a pinch. Situations where a pinch might be recommended is if there's very strong apical dominance. This can be caused by very, very low DLI or daily light integrals. That's why we were recommending greater than 10 moles. But if you're simply in a location where you just can't get that, a pinch can be a recommendation to remedy that. The photos on the right side of this slide represent some trials done in very far northern locations under maybe 2 or 3 DLIs. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So a pinch or PGRs work as well. So let's talk a little bit more about pinching and where to pinch and when to pinch. Pinching on this, like vegetative material, can be done in the tray, so you can shear it through the machines, or should you choose to pinch after transplant. So at the bottom, through one of our grower trials, this is Kabloom yellow. The left plant is pinched and the right plant is non-pinched. And the pinch in most of these was done as what we would call the soft pinch, as demonstrated in the picture on the right, leaving about at least 4 nodes. A common question that we were getting was, does the pinching delay flowering? It may delay flowering, but not in all cases. Because calibs are not generally sold at their first open flower, but when those lateral branches start flowering, and there's a significant amount of flowering on the plants, we've seen that pinching delays time for that first flower. However, it doesn't delay flowering on the lateral branches. So essentially, the time to a saleable crop, meaning a high amount of color on that, remains the same as long as the pinch is a soft one. Another thing we observed in our internal trials that with PGRs, we had good-looking plants in the quartz or 4-inch pots, but we felt the pinch really gave it just a little bit higher element of quality. It evened things out just a bit more. So if you're growing in 4s or quartz or 6s, pinch can really give you that very tidy plant. We found that non-pinched plant material in the baskets were fine. There was no benefit. We didn't see any better result at the end in baskets of a pinched product. And so now that we've gone through the stages of the plug culture, we land at the crop time for the plugs. And testing in the various plug sizes, we saw everything from 288s to 72s and 50s. Many of you in the audience trialed it in assorted plug sizes. A majority of the trialing was done in a 288. And I would say quite consistently, the plug crop time is about 5 to 6 weeks, regardless of generally where you are in the country. Bumping it up to a little bit larger, like a 128, 105, adding a couple weeks plug time seem to be quite consistent. So essentially, these plug times are well within the wheelhouse of a lot of bedding plant plug production scenarios.
Similar to most vegetative Calibrachoas, the Calibrachoas from seed are either obligate or facultative long day plants. Therefore, they have a long day photoperiod response. They either need long days to flower or flower faster under long day photoperiods. In this particular slide for Kabloom Deep Blue, we are showing day lengths of 10 hours, 11 hours, all the way to 14 hours as you progress towards from left to right. And NI stands for night interruption treatment, which was given from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., so it was a 4-hour night interruption. And the days to 50% flowering denotes 50% plants in the population that was forced under that day length were flowering on that day. So the slide indicates that as pretty much a minimum critical day length for reasonably fast flowering would be about 11 hours. As the day length increased to 13 or 14 hours, there was a further reduction in flowering time for Kabloom Deep Blue. And this scenario is fairly similar to what we observe for a lot of spreading petunias like wave petunias, so this is nothing unique. So based on the photoperiod response of the varieties in Kabloom series as well as Crave Sunset, we have categorized them by their minimum day length requirement from about 10 hours of day length to 12 hours of day length. And Kabloom Deep Pink, which has a minimum day length requirement of 12 hours, probably has the most significant obligate long day response in the series. So once people find out that these are long day plants, the first question that we have been getting from Finnish as well as plug growers is, can this series be given long days either in plug stage or in finish for a short period of time, and therefore any plants would be initiated and then they can be forced under natural short days. This particular scenario is often referred to as limited inductive photoperiod, or LIP. Essentially, in LIP, you provide long days from end of juvenile period until flower induction, and thereafter, plants can be finished under natural short days. And once again, this is very similar to the plug lighting of easy wave petunias. We partner with floriculture program at Michigan State University in order to determine what would be an appropriate LIP protocol that we can share with the marketplace as we launch this series into the market. MSU researchers determined that juvenility ends at 6 leaves, and it's about 6 weeks from sowing. Therefore, if you remember Lisa's previous chart of the plug crop time, this is exactly when a 288 cell is pullable. So from sowing until a pullable plug in 288 cell size, the juvenility is already ended, and thereafter lighting treatments can begin. This next slide shows LIP of Kabloom Deep Pink. You might recollect that Deep Pink is the variety that has the strongest long day requirement of the bunch. So this is probably this is the variety that requires the most duration of long day treatment in LIP. This is a little bit of a complex slide, so let me take a few seconds and go from left to right and describe the treatment given to these plants. The first plant only received short days, so it was constantly under short days, and the day length used for short day treatment was 9 hours. Now, Deep Pink has a minimum day length requirement of 12 hours, therefore plants never flowered under 9-hour short days. The next 4 plants received 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks of long days in 72 cell trays. Thereafter, they were transplanted in these 4-inch pots and forced under short days. Some plants did flower after 3 weeks of long day treatment in trays and after transplanting under short days, but really, in order to achieve 100% flowering consistently across the population, Kabloom Deep Pink requires 4 weeks of long day treatment, and then you can force them under short days. The next plant was under constant long days, And if you compare that with the plant on its left, which received 4 weeks of long days in trace, there is really no visible difference. We counted number of branches, number of flowers, and nothing was significantly different between these two particular treatments. So after giving just 4 weeks of long days in plug trace, plants were very comparable to those grown constantly under long days. And I'll finish off this photograph by describing the last two treatments. The last two treatments were either 2 weeks of long days or 4 weeks of long days, but instead of giving them in plug trays, the long days were actually given after transplant in the pots, and thereafter the pots were moved to short days for finishing. And one of the objectives we were trying to address was, is there any difference between giving long days in plug trays versus giving long days after transplant? Is there any difference in habit, branching, or number of flowers per pot? And we essentially found out that for all of the varieties in Kabloom as well as the Crave Sunset variety, there is no difference if you finish in 4-inch pots, whether you give long days in plug trays or in finished pots. This next slide is showing Kabloom Yellow. And Kabloom Yellow response was very similar to the rest of the varieties in Kabloom as well as the Crave series. With only 1 week of long days, whether it was given in trays or finished pots, plants were completely induced, and then they could be forced under short days. So essentially, with an exception of Deep Pink, Kabloom series can be given 1 week of long day treatment after their juvenility ends, and then they can be forced under natural short days. So to summarize the LIP work, we have a suggested plug lighting protocol that we want to share with you. In a way, it's a trial protocol because it's based on results from work done at Michigan State University, but we have not yet conducted any grower trials. So we are hoping that some of you would test this under your situation and give us feedback on how this protocol works out for you. It's a pretty straightforward protocol. You should sow and grow Kabloom or Crave Sunset under natural photoperiod for 6 weeks. Thereafter, provide long days to either plugs or finished pots for 4 weeks, and then finish under natural photoperiod, such as short days, to get saleable plants. Remember, with an exception of Kabloom Deep Pink, all the other varieties only require 1 week of that long day treatment, but Deep Pink does require 4 full weeks in order to get 100% flowering.
There is one question, Sonali, from Rodney. I think it's addressed in what you're saying, but I just want to make sure it's clear. The question is, can you initiate flowering in plug stage and not have to provide night interruption in finish?
Yes. So essentially, if you extrapolate from this protocol, you need the first 6 weeks in order to get over the juvenility period, and thereafter you can either transplant in slightly larger plug trays, such as 72 cells, or you can directly sow in 72 cells and wait until plants have set 6 minimum leaves, and thereafter light in the plug trays for 4 weeks, and then you can finish under natural short days.
All right, thanks. Well, we move now from the plug culture into finished culture. Well, the good news is the finished culture is probably a little less complex than the plug culture. This material can be finished very similarly to vegetative Calibrachoa. We do want to call out a few specific points that we found in our trials and the trials with you folks in the marketplace. But essentially, what this photo demonstrates from our spring trials is that the finished product of the Kabloom Deep Blue can look similar to other current vegetative products in the marketplace. For reference, the timing of this plant material, the Kablooms were sown on week 50, and the vegetative inputs of 105 liners were brought in and dropped in week 1. So there's a little bit of a crop timing difference there, of course. And I'll get into that in just a moment in terms of crop timing. The container size that we recommend for Kablooms and Crave really start at a 4.5 inch quartz. That container size iteration. A single plant in those is sufficient, basket applications, 10s, 12s, multiple of plant inputs, 3 to 5 per basket it was very sufficient. We don't recommend this for packs for a couple of reasons. In packs, some of these are a little bit larger plants, so they can get into each other, making it a little bit more difficult to control. And secondly, many parts of our market presume that pack material goes into the ground. And these aren't the greatest in-ground performers. Like a lot of Calibrachoa, they're average, and there are a lot of other stronger and better things to put in ground. So for those two reasons, we're not recommending packs, but right into container sizes that probably many of you are already currently growing the calibs vegetatively in. Average daily temperatures for finishing plant material can be cool grown, similar to vegetative Calibrachoa. We have found no greater sensitivity to cool conditions for these genetics compared to the vegetative ones. We suggest really not going much cooler than, mid-50s, because that does slow things down. So cool growing, like any crop, the cooler you grow, the more delayed the flowering can become when compared to warm growing. So you can finish these very similarly to your vegetative Calibrachoas. We have some tips on PGRs for finish. One very common and popular and good product for finishing the Kablooms and the Crave is bonsai. Drenching at between 1 and 3 part per million, 7 days after transplant. Once the plant material gets rooted out, then you can start applying, and then reapply as needed. And we found this to be pretty consistent across all of the trial sites. Now, again, we're not recommending B9 on majority of them because it does cause the stippling. So it's a good-looking finish, but because of the stippling, we're a little bit more cautious about that recommendation. One thing that's important to note in the genetics is that the Kabloom white is more sensitive to bonsai drench. So we recommend applying lower or potentially less frequently on the Kabloom white. Let me show you what we're talking about here. So for reference, these are some quartz that were finished from an untreated control on the left, bonsai at 1 part per million, 4 total applications, and then bonsai at 3 parts per million, 4 total applications. And you can see the bonsai gives a nice control to the plant, well branched. There's height as well as width management for the product. So the 3 part per million multiple times for the yellow is very, very good. This photo depicts why we're more cautious when it comes to Kabloom white. Kabloom white at 3 parts per million, 4 applications is more stunted. So we're recommending, 1 part per million application or less frequent applications. It provides good control, but it doesn't control that so much it looks like it's been stepped on with PGR. Likewise, it's the same in baskets. We're looking here at the 3 part per million bonsai on the right, a little bit of a heavy, hard look to the plant, but the 1 part per million is very suitable for the Kabloom white.
And Lisa, we've got a question from Noah who wants to know, what about top floor? Have you done any trials with that on finish?
Good question, Noah. We've started to look more at top floor, and actually Sonali and I have just recently been brainstorming our next set of culture research, and that's probably number 1 on our list, to further explore top floor. So Sonali, have you, from your grower visits, do you have any preliminary information you can share regarding top floor on finish?
I haven't really seen top floor on Kabloom and Crave, but there are growers who use it successfully on, for example, easy way petunias. And the drench rate of somewhere between 1 and 3 parts, depending upon the variety, time of the year, as well as the pot size, seems to be what people are trialing. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kabloom, based on which pot size, falls into a very similar rate range. So that would be something to trial.
So I guess stay tuned because we'll have more culture information as spring ends next year. So thank you for that question, Noah.
Or do your own trials, Noah. Send them the details, the results.
So this slide lays out the various range of vigor within the Kabloom and the Crave groupings. I think it surprises folks to see that Kabloom White is on the least side of vigor because it is the fastest, one of the fastest to germinate. It gets off to a quick start, but as it finishes, it is a more controlled grower, so it is more of the compact. The red, the deep blue, the deep pink are all some mid-range vigor. Yellow has more vigor, slightly upright, and then the Sunset in the Crave collection is a larger dimension plant. It's a little bit larger overall, and so that's why it is also in its own place. It's got its own start of a collection. So this really just gives you reference for, laying out how you might want to apply PGRs.
And Lisa, would it be fair to say that for Kabloom White, you need less of a paclibutrazole, either lower rate or fewer applications? You might need a little bit more of that for Crave Sunset, but all the rest of the colors in the Kabloom series can be in one PGR program to get similar profiles for the plants.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that's a good summary on how to group them.
We've got a question from Roger. Hey, Roger, how's it going, buddy? Any trials with Florel while we're still sort of in the PGR realm of things?
Yeah, well, in some of the trials I was involved with, Florel on plugs really provided a unusual, very stretchy growth. So we're not recommending Florel in the plugs per se. Now for finish, Sonali, do you have any thoughts on Florel for finish?
No, I haven't seen any grower trials, and essentially since this is a seed product, sometimes on vegetative plants, Florel is used after transplant to knock off the flowers so that all plants, the flowering clock is reset at that point, and then all plants bloom together. Since this is a seed product, there is not that additional benefit because plants start with their juvenility, so there is natural clock cycle there. So I'm not really sure if there is an additional benefit to trialing Florel. One word of caution is just the odd look. We have trials Florel configure as well as some other branching agents on the plugs, but not on the finish side. But there were trials at the later stages of the plug, so it would just be 1 week before transplant or a fairly young stage. And some of these chemicals were really phytotoxic in terms of distorting leaves and changing foliage color. So essentially as a breeding company, it should be our goal to put out a product that is well branched naturally. And I don't think there is a huge advantage of using the branching agents.
All right. How about bonsai drenches, fewer drenches, higher rates? Any work done in that realm?
What we've seen in our trials, we did a range of internal trials, and a few of them were higher rates. I think from our market trials where we're getting a broader spectrum because of the range of the geography, in the warmer, higher light, later season, say for fall production, that might be beneficial. I don't have specific information where I can say this is the exact higher rate. A lot of it is about managing it within the own facility. If you're doing summer production for fall, you may need to use a little bit higher rates or a little bit more frequent application of the product, but we don't have specifics yet on higher rates or fewer numbers, higher rates at this point.
All right.
Again, it'll be part of our goal going forward is to continue to collect that information.
All right. And Matt wants to know, how about combinations of PGRs, maybe like D9 Cycocell or something like that?
We put that on our list. There have been some grower trials where they were starting to put together some combinations of assorted PGRs. And so the preliminary information has been somewhat limited, and we've not done a lot of replications yet in our own facilities to be able to come up with a very real solid recipe, let's say, for that. Sonali, do you have any general observations from what you've seen in the marketplace on combining PGRs?
I think a lot of growers are combining B9 along with floral on the vegetative product, but once again, getting greater degree of branching from a single cutting is the objective there. And since our breeding goal overall is to provide a better branch product, I'm not really sure that that's necessary in this case.
Well, these are good questions for us because, as I mentioned, we're putting together our wish list for what we want to go and plan to do culture research for this next year. So all these go on our wish list, either to do internally or partner with people in the marketplace.
There you go.
Yeah. Finished crop times. So this is another very popular question. How long is the crop time for these seed Calibrachoas? So this chart lays out two broken down crop times. So the container sizes are on the left. In the middle is the crop time from a 288 to 100% flowering, the number of weeks. So when you're transplanting from a 288 to a quart, you're finished in 7 to 8 weeks. Add a couple more weeks for 10 or 12-inch baskets. So
we seem to have been disconnected. Sonali, can you still hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, but the slide didn't advance. We are still on the finished Vigor.
Okay. Well, you know what? Then I'll talk through for hopefully everyone can hear me. So we're talking about finished crop time. So what is the finished crop time in total weeks from dropping that seed to having a saleable product? So from a 4-inch or a 6-inch, you're in to 100% flowering, meaning the population of plants has a high degree of flowering on it, is about 12 to 13 weeks. In a basket or a, one more, oh, we're waiting for that slide to come back up. So in a basket, there we go. In a basket or a 10-inch or 12-inch basket, we're looking at 14 to 15 weeks. And this is really what we found very consistently in our Elburn, Illinois facility. Spring, natural day length, kind of cool temperatures. And from the multiple years of trials, we have, we've seen this be pretty consistent. Now, if you have the great fortune of growing in a warm, sunny, high light location, California, or you're growing in the summer for fall production, that crop time can come down 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. And summary. We have a couple of summary slides here. We just want to call out some real key points about what we've talked through because we've covered a lot of ground. First of all, in plug culture, there's really a sweet spot at about 73 degrees and moisture level 5. And those really benefit those slightly slower germinating varieties, and but it's not detrimental to the faster germinating ones. And we've provided you the breakdown of those that require a little bit longer and those that are a little bit speedier to germinate. As you move through stages 2 to 4, it's about reducing the temperature and the moisture levels, being careful not to allow those plugs to wilt. There's a range of PGR options for plugs. While we really like diminizide, we have a cautionary note on that one due to the phytotoxicity response that we've observed. But there's bonsai and top floor, which provide good height control as well. And light quality in the plug is very important, so we would like you to aim for 10 or greater moles. If that doesn't happen and those plugs get a little bit stretched out, pinching is a great resolution for that as well. We've walked through where to pinch and the benefits of the pinching in the plug. Can be done shearing in your trays or post-transplant. No risk either way. And when you're looking at the finishing culture, the finishing, there is a range of minimum day length requirements within the assortment, deep pink being the latest and liking 12 hours. The balance of the group fall between about 10 and 11 and that's represented in our crop culture on the website, downloadable, and we'll get you the links to that here at the end. Certainly these can be cool grown, cold grown, just like your vegetative calibs, and PGRs, we like the look of the bonsai paclobutazole drenches, just with a cautionary note that Kabloom White is a little bit more compact, so go with a lower rate or less frequency on the Kabloom White for the best quality.
All right,
With
well done,
we
Lisa.
covered a lot of ground. So we've noticed there are folks that are putting questions up on the board, so we have some time. Sonali and I can answer some questions.
Good. Yeah, we tried to get to all the ones we could that were kind of pertinent to the specific topic. We've got a couple more here at least. How about the flowering times between varieties? How much difference between varieties under the same conditions in spring?
If you were to take the average difference in a Elburn spring natural day length, you're probably at about a week difference, what I call the window from the first variety to the last variety, and deep pink is going to be that last variety. So we generally see the white and the yellow and blue are the speediest to flower.
All right, but it's a brand
and
new
those of you who actually attended the spring trials with Pan Am, actually at the beginning of the spring trials, all the varieties except deep pink were flowering, and deep pink started flowering towards the end of their trials. I think that was a very good representation of what actually would happen in real life.
Yeah, well, I suspect it's a breakthrough series, and certainly things will probably be tightened up as breeding is going on, someplace right out behind us, no doubt.
Yeah, well, yeah, Jason Jandrew is madly at work breeding new products, so yeah, this is the starting point, and so we will be talking about new varieties, hopefully, for the next many years.
All right, and Sonali, you wanted to make a comment about when not to pinch. Talk about that.
If those of you who are trying the protocol for LIP or limited inductive photoperiod, also known as plug lighting situation, essentially are lighting the plugs and inducing them. And if you pinch off those plugs that have been just lit, you're essentially pinching off the flowering buds from the plant. And so if that is your plan, to light your plugs and not light in the finish and grow under short days in finish, please don't pinch your plugs.
All right. And, well, last question, Hugh, my buddy Hugh, asked this one. It's probably the $64 question.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, I am a finished grower, and I buy in rooted Cabaret Calibrachoa. How would I benefit from buying and growing these seed Calibrachoa?
Yeah, that's
the Kabloom series. Is there a benefit?
That's a great question. We talked a lot about that with our visitors at spring trials and since then. And I think it really depends on what kind of input you want to bring in. So this being from seed, if you're dropping seed, if you're sowing seed, certainly you can get that in and tuck it on your shelf and sow when needed. So there's less of a risk of weather or other challenges impacting the inputs. It also can help, you can schedule your labor as such. So there's just some functional benefits.
Yeah, you can't stick cuttings on a shelf for a few months.
I don't think the breeding companies have figured out that quite yet. So if you're buying in plugs, it's really a matter of what your program, how many colors you need. If you're, say, challenged with any of the varieties, maybe looking at one of the colors, but certainly the color range in a Cabaret is quite broad compared to where we are with the Kabloom and the Crave. So it's really a business operational functional approach, particularly if you're buying in plugs and obviously buying in the rooted material. I think if somebody wants to look at the program, the Crave Sunset's a really, I call it a neat color. It's a wow color. It's got nice bicolor look. That's a nice one to take a look at, just to explore what the seed product has to offer. Likewise, taking a look at one of the Kablooms. The white's a nice variety. We talk about deep pink being later to flower, but it's a fantastic color. So if you're looking at just trying some of these, bring them in and compare how they do in your facility.
Well, another obvious one might be price. We are talking seed. versus cutting.
Yeah, and the price discussion is probably something that our customers need to have with their distributor reps.
It is a premium product.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a premium product. It goes well in the quarts. It fits into the basket program. So, yeah, it is a premium product.
Okay. Yeah, and when I first heard about this, kind of my first thought was, well, it's seed, so it's cheaper. But I realized there's just a lot more that goes into it. And actually the convenience of having inventory on hand, knowing you've got those Calibrachoa when you need them and not being at the mercy of, cuttings, might be a bigger benefit for you. So anyway,
and I'll make a couple other points, Chris. We have confirmed with our pathologists that seed doesn't carry some of the devastating diseases. So that's been a constant struggle with some of the vegetative materials over the years, be it from our corporation or from others. It's just really convenient to have seed because it doesn't carry some of the virulent diseases that have devastated our industry. And the second point I wanted to make is if you're looking for shoulder market opportunity, particularly fall production, the cutting availability can be quite limited. For example, in the South, the season can go on for a long time in the fall, and if you're looking to put in basket programs for Calibrachoa, you may not be able to get unrooted cuttings of colors that you desire. So it opens up an opportunity there.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
There you go. And it's just the beginning, so we'll have to see where we are in a few years with the color range and those kinds of things. All right, well, if you have more questions, our fine experts, Lisa and Sonali, will be available for you. Here are their email addresses, llacy@Pan-American Seed, and, well, you can see them right there. And if you've got even more questions, well, why not contact your regional Pan-American Seed product rep? They're listed right here for you. 5 different regions, 5 different geniuses who can come right out to your greenhouse and talk about these with you. And these will be in the archive, so you may be jotting them down madly. Don't worry, you'll be able to go online and find them. And I'm sure you can go out to the Pan-American Seed website and find them as well. And then for a little bit more specific detail about Kabloom and Crave, we've got a couple of PDF fact sheets, grower facts sheets that you can get, and I made it easy for you by using the website TinyURL. If you haven't used TinyURL, it turns a big, ugly URL into an easy one, like tinyurl.com/growerfactskabloom or /growerfactscrave. So go to those and you can get some nice cultural information. And last but not least, Lisa, if you missed this webinar, well, then you're probably not listening to me right now. But if you want to relive this webinar, a few people said they had a few audio glitches early on. If you missed something critical, or if you want to go back and get some of this information, within an hour or two, we will have this archived at ballpublishing.com/webinars. There'll be a link to it. Share it with your friends, coworkers, your plug producer, or whoever you want to. And of course, another great shout out to our sponsor, Ball Seed, who helps make these free webinars possible.
Well, and also I want to thank you, Chris, and Ball Publishing for putting this on. We appreciate the chance to always get to talk about.
It's been our pleasure, and we'll retire to the green room for that giant buffet lunch that we always cater in here at the world headquarters. Well, all right. On that note, for Lisa and Sonali, thank you so much from North Carolina, and all the folks at Pan-American Seed, Ball Seed, and Ball Publishing. This is Chris Beatties saying so long.